Money grows, peace can grow, money stack can grow, only money grows.
What's up, YouTube fam? It's your man King Marcel, and we back with another video. So the video I got in store for y'all today is the Jewish family that owns all of hip-hop. I feel like somebody needs to really do a series on the Jewish people that own, the Jewish family that owns, and then it needs to be one for every industry, because that's literally what is going on. You know what I'm saying? And they want us to believe that's some type of conspiracy theory, but when you look into the facts of the matter, there's a lot of validity to that these so-called Jewish people own almost every industry that anybody would ever try to get into. So it's like we are all in servitude to these people who aren't even the real Jews. So we're about to get into this video so that it can get rid of a lot of misnomers, especially when it comes to hip-hop, because a lot of people don't want to believe that they are the ones who are directing hip-hop in the direction that it has been going in all the drill music and all the self-detrimental type of melodies and songs that have been coming out in my community. So we about to get into this. Make sure you guys hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell so that you're notified whenever I do drop a video here. We're on the road to 500 subscribers, so make sure you guys are subbing up and joining the kingdom. But with that being said, let's get into this one.
Right now, at this very moment, there is one man who decides what you hear on the radio. One man whose company controls what goes viral on Spotify. One man who has the power to make an artist the biggest name on the planet or erase them like they never existed if they go against his agenda. And you probably have no idea who he is. This very man is what some people blame for the violence in the black community and what goes in drill hip-hop today. Meet the Jewish man, Sir Lucian Grainge. And the family dynasty he's building quietly controls more of the music industry than any single entity in the history of recorded sound. Think about every artist you've been listening to this week. Drake, Kendrick Lamar, The Eminem, Post Malone, Lil Baby, Lil Durk, Morgan Wallen, every single one of them. Every song, every album, every stream is making this one man and his family richer. Universal Music Group controls roughly 40% of all recorded music on Earth. That's not a label. That's not a company. That's a monopoly with a playlist.
One family owns 40%? 40% of all music. That's not a monopoly. That's nonsense.
And here's where it gets really
that's total and utter nonsense that something like that could have happened. And that no one questioned it. No one's tried to ever step on the toes of this man and his family. But we know that they have, and let's see what ended up happening to those said people.
Interesting. When Drake, one of the highest paid artists alive, a man with a reported $400 million deal with Universal, started having problems with them, what happened? His career cratered. Kanye West called Lucian Grainge Drake's rich baby daddy and said Drake's music had become so commodified and controlled that it doesn't even connect with people anymore.
Exactly.
Then Drake turned around and filed a legal petition accusing Universal of manipulating streams, using bots, and running a payola scheme to boost Kendrick Lamar's diss track against him. And Lucian Grainge, he barely flinched, because when you own the game, you don't have to worry about the players. Stay with me through this whole video, because by the end, you're going to understand how one Jewish family from North London turned the entire global music industry into their personal empire, and why speaking against them might be the most dangerous thing an artist can do. Before we talk about Lucian Grainge specifically, you need to understand the architecture of the machine he runs.
Eve to me is basically freedom.
Yeah, I know they could have this chock full of ass, because they do not want us to know about this stuff.
Universal Music Group, UMG, is not just a record label. It is a collection of empires stacked inside of empires. When Grainge restructured the company in 2024, he organized it around two massive hubs. On the East Coast, you've got Republic Corps, which controls Republic Records, Def Jam, Island Records, and Mercury Records. On the West Coast, you've got Interscope Capitol Labels Group, which controls Interscope, Geffen, Capitol Records, Motown, Priority Records, Blue Note, and Verve. Let that sink in for a second. Def Jam Records, the home of Jay-Z, Kanye West, Rihanna, DMX, Nas, Rick Ross, Pusha T, and nearly every major hip-hop artist of the last 4 decades, is owned by Universal. Republic Records, home of Taylor Swift, Drake, The Weeknd, Post Malone, Ariana Grande, Lil Wayne, and Nicki Minaj, is owned by Universal. Interscope Records, where Eminem, Dr. Dre, Lady Gaga, Kendrick Lamar, and 50 Cent all got their biggest platforms, is owned by Universal. Capitol Records, Motown, Geffen, Island, Mercury, EMI, all Universal. Every one of those labels that you grew up thinking was its own independent institution, all underneath the same roof, all answering to the same boardroom, and at the top of that boardroom sits Sir Lucian Grange, a 65-year-old Jewish man from North London who left school at 18 with no degree and no industry connections, and somehow built the most powerful media company in the history of music. Now here's the thing about power at that level. It's invisible. The people who truly run the world don't need to be famous. They don't need a Wikipedia page with millions of hits. They don't need to be on the cover of Rolling Stone. Lucian Grange rarely grants interviews. He moves in the shadows of awards ceremonies and year-end memos to staff. But make no mistake, when he speaks, the entire music industry listens. Billboard magazine named him the most powerful person in the music business not once, not twice, but 6 times. He's the only person in the history of their Power 100 list to hold the top spot that many times. In 2020, they invented a new category just for him, Executive of the Decade, and in 2025, Variety ranked him among the top 10 most powerful executives in all of entertainment. You know what's wild? Even the rappers know who he is. Drake name-dropped him in a Migos collaboration back in 2021. Shut Done Changed, billionaires talk to me different when they see my pay stub from Lucian Grange. Travis Scott gave him his flowers on a Drake and 21 Savage track. Only signing the gang, we, the new Lucian Grange. These are some of the biggest artists alive acknowledging that this man's signature on their check means everything. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. To understand how Lucian Grange got here, we need to go back to where this all started.
Don't forget
Not
Diddy.
With him, but with the generation before him. Because this story, like all the best ones, starts in the streets.
I don't know if you're going to mention that, and I'm going to just throw that out here in the beginning of this video so you all know. He was heavily implemented in everything that went on with Diddy. It was even, they even said that in some of those documents that Diddy was this man's boyfriend. That it was footage and people, not footage, but it was evidence. I'm pretty sure it's footage out there because Diddy had cameras everywhere. But it was people who said that one day after a party, they caught Lucian coming out of Diddy's bedroom after being in there all night with cum stains on his back. And they were the only 2 in there. There were no women involved. It was just them 2. And Lucian came out with Diddy cum stains on his back. Come on, y'all, man, y'all.
Here's a fact that most people in hip-hop don't talk about, but the ones who've been paying attention have known for decades. Jewish entrepreneurs didn't just participate in the music industry, they built it. Go back to the 1940s. The major labels at the time, Columbia, RCA, Decca, had all but abandoned what they called race music, black artists making black music for black audiences. There was no money in it as far as the establishment was concerned. The industry gatekeepers in those years were almost entirely white, Anglo-Saxon Protestants who ran music the way they ran everything else in America, as a closed system that kept certain kinds of people out and certain kinds of sound invisible. So, who stepped into that void? Jewish small businessmen, men who understood what it felt like to be excluded by the mainstream, men who had immigrant parents or grandparents who'd built something from nothing in a country that didn't always want them there, men who recognized talent and potential that the establishment couldn't or wouldn't see. Leonard Chess and his brother Phil Chess, 2 Polish Jewish immigrants who'd come to Chicago, founded Chess Records in 1950. Their roster reads like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was designed around it. Muddy Waters, Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, Etta James, Howlin' Wolf, Little Walter, Sonny Boy Williamson. These are the artists who invented rock and roll, the artists that the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin later admitted to studying obsessively and drawing from. The artists whose innovations were so fundamental to the entire trajectory of Western popular music that you can trace almost every genre that followed back to the work recorded at Chess Records in Chicago, and it was 2 Jewish brothers from Poland who gave them their platform. In New York, Alfred Lion co-owned Blue Note Records, the jazz label that defined cool for an entire generation. Mo Ash built Folkways Records, which preserved more American musical traditions than any archive in history. Milt Gabler founded Commodore Records and was later credited with being one of the most fair-dealing executives in the industry at a time when exploitation of black artists was near universal. Jerry Wexler, a Jewish music executive who later coined the term rhythm and blues.
Music is one of the best ways to express your feelings, and that's why today we're gonna do some.
Sorry about the ass.
To replace the industry's dehumanizing race music classification, ran Atlantic Records alongside Ahmet Ertegun and helped launch the careers of Ray Charles, Aretha Franklin, Led Zeppelin, and Wilson Pickett. Art Rupe, another Jewish executive, ran Specialty Records and signed Little Richard, Sam Cooke, and Fats Domino, three of the foundational figures in the transition.
But they like to say that this is a conspiracy. Let me not say, because it is a conspiracy, but they like to say that it's a conspiracy theory. Like it's no truth to the fact that these people own the music industry. And it's not just the music industry. It's just what we're talking about right now. But all of these owners so far have been Jewish. Not just white, not just, you know what I'm saying, anything else, not Chinese, not nothing else. They all been Jewish. But they like to label you a conspiracy theorist or anti-Semitic for saying that. Even if you are a Jew yourself, an actual Jew, not Jewish, a Jew. They try to say, throw that anti-Semitic label on you for stating the obvious. These are all facts. These folks run the music industry. Like, come on, we got to break
from
these
gospel and
narratives.
R&B to rock and roll. Herman Lubinsky built Savoy Records in Newark. Sid Nathan ran King Records in Cincinnati and signed James Brown, whose first hit, Please, 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 in 1956, began one of the most transformative careers in American music history. Now, it's worth noting that this history is complicated. Not all of these executives were saints. Some of them exploited the artists they signed, underpaid them, took publishing rights they had no business taking. The same web of creative cross-pollination that made this era so extraordinary was also full of financial exploitation that left many black artists with nothing while white executives got rich. The Chess brothers themselves were accused of shady accounting practices. Herman Lubinsky had a reputation in the industry for being ruthless with money. This was an era when few artists, regardless of race, owned their masters, and the executives who did often got rich at the artist's expense. But the cultural contribution is undeniable. Without these labels, without these Jewish entrepreneurs who saw something in black music when the mainstream wouldn't touch it, the entire trajectory of American popular music would be different. Hip-hop might not exist. Rock and roll might have stayed a regional phenomenon. Soul and R&B might have...
We are not going to frame that like that. I'm sorry, sir. Whoever made this video, we are not going to frame that like that. If they are the ones behind the doors that were keeping the doors closed originally and then realized, oh, wait, we can market those niggers. If that wasn't the case, we would have flourished because we created all of these. We created the blues. We created the jazz. We created hip hop. We created every music industry here and abroad. So we're not going to sit here and make it seem like black people wasn't going to have those opportunities if it wasn't for these people. No, but let's frame it as if these people wasn't keeping these people at bay, keeping these people disfranchised from the inception of music, because these people aren't the artists. How are these people becoming rich off of the actual artists who are creating the music? It wouldn't be a music industry if it wasn't for black people. So to frame it that they wouldn't even have an opportunity if it wasn't for the people who had them enslaved in the first place, because that's a misnomer that we got to destroy too, that most of the people who had slaves were Jewish people. Also, white people were also enslaved too. It was just under indentured servants. It was glorified slavery for them. But all of us, the indentured servants and the actual slaves, all served who? The Jewish people. So we got to stop with these misnomers that we were getting opportunities, but we are just modern day slaves. All of us. From the artists to the people who work in a 9 to 5. Working for these people still. Come on, man. Stop it.
Remained invisible to mainstream America for decades longer. The pattern repeated itself when hip-hop arrived. When rap music was still being called a fad, when radio wouldn't touch it, when major labels thought it was going nowhere and dismissed it as noise made by kids who would move on to something else in a year, it was again Jewish entrepreneurs who moved first. Rick Rubin, born Richard Rubin, Jewish kid from Long Island whose parents wanted him to be a lawyer, founded Def Jam Records out of his NYU dorm room in 1983 with $5,000 borrowed from his parents. His first signing was a rapper named Tila Rock. He recruited Russell Simmons as a partner, and together they turned Def Jam into the most important hip-hop label ever created. LL Cool J, the Beastie Boys, Public Enemy, Run DMC, DMX, Jay-Z, Kanye West all came through that label, all came through a vision that started in a dorm room funded by a Jewish kid who believed in the music when nobody else would. Tom
Bob told us that they were going to test the alien craft that night.
Sorry for all these ads. I could tell they finna have
Silverman,
this.
another Jewish...
They noticed that. This is 9 minutes. That's 4 ads within 9 minutes. Or was it 5? 4 to 5 ads. In fact, every time we talking about these people. Because they know people have low attention spans. You see all these ads, you'll watch my video and see all these ads, you'll just click right off of it because it was another ad. This is nonsense. But they play this game,
executive,
man,
founded
really
Tommy Boy
over.
Records and signed Queen Latifah, Coolio, De La Soul, and Naughty by Nature. Aaron Fuchs founded Tough City Records, the first rap label to secure a major label distribution deal, and worked with Cold Crush Brothers and other pioneering acts before Def Jam even existed as a public brand. Jerry Heller, Jewish, co-founded Ruthless Records with Eazy-E and helped introduce NWA to the world, the group that gave us Ice Cube, Dr. Dre, and the template for West Coast gangsta rap. Paul Rosenberg, also Jewish, became Eminem's manager and one of the most powerful figures in hip-hop business, later serving as CEO of Def Jam itself. Clive Davis, Jewish, from Brooklyn, a lawyer by training who stumbled into music and never looked back, founded Arista Records, signed Whitney Houston, and discovered her potential when everyone else saw a backup singer, launched Barry Manilow, developed Patti Smith, signed the Grateful Dead, relaunched Aretha Franklin's commercial career, and later founded J Records, where he launched Alicia Keys with Songs in a Minor, which sold 10 million copies and swept the Grammys. He became Chief Creative Officer of Sony Music. He is widely considered the most artistically influential record executive in the history of American music. So by the time we get to Lucian Grange, there is already a deep, complicated, powerful history of Jewish music executives shaping what the world hears. From blues to jazz to rock and roll to soul to hip-hop, Grange didn't appear out of nowhere. He is the culmination of an entire tradition that stretches back 80 years, a tradition built on a particular combination of cultural outsider status, business acumen, and a genuine appreciation for music that the mainstream had written off. But what he built is in a completely different stratosphere from anything that came before. February 29, 1960, Leap Year Day. Lucian Charles Grange is born in North London into a Jewish household. His father, Cecil, and mother, Marion, raise him in what he later describes as a music-loving home. His older brother, Nigel, will later go on to found Ensign Records. So there's music in the family DNA. But nobody in the house is rich. Nobody is connected to the industry in any significant way. Lucian attends Queen Elizabeth's Grammar School for Boys. He's a decent student. But at 18 years old, when most of his classmates are preparing to go to university, he makes a decision that will change the course of music history. He drops out. He doesn't take his exams. He walks out of school because he knows with absolute certainty what he wants to do. He starts at the absolute bottom. In 1978, Lucian Grange becomes a runner at MPC, a talent scout company. A runner, that's the industry term for the person who does every job nobody else wants to do. You pick up dry cleaning, you make coffee, you deliver packages, you answer phones, you sit in on meetings and keep your mouth shut, you watch and you learn and you wait. But Lucian Grange is not just watching, he's studying. He has an ear that people in the industry will later describe as nearly supernatural. The ability to hear a record and know whether it has something, whether it connects, before anyone else in the room can articulate why. From MPC, he lands a job in the A&R department at April Music Publishing. A&R stands for Artists and Repertoire, the people whose job it is to find talent and develop it. This is where careers get made. This is where Grange finds his first signing, the Psychedelic Furs, a post-punk band from London. Not exactly hip-hop, but the instinct to see potential where others don't, That's already there. By 1982, he's the director of RCA Music Publishing. He's not yet in his mid-20s and he's already directing. By 1984, he's an A&R director at MCA Records. In 1986, he establishes Polygram Music Publishing. In his 30s, he becomes the managing director of Polydor UK, one of the most storied record labels in British history, home of the Rolling Stones, Elton John, and the Bee Gees. Every move is a step upward. Every room he enters, he finds a way to become indispensable. Throughout the 1990s, while hip-hop is exploding across the Atlantic in America, Grange is building his reputation in the UK as the man who can spot a star before they know they're one. He signs Amy Winehouse. He signs and develops artists that his peers overlook. He becomes known as someone who doesn't follow trends. He shapes.
Now, is it that he's spotting these people? Or is he manipulating the system so that they become these people? That's what we got to start asking. Are these people doing stuff for this man behind closed doors that's making him choose these folks? Are they a part of some particular secret society? Are they willing to give him a hand job? Are they willing to do whatever it is to tank their soul a little more in order for some materialistic things? Is that what's really going on? Not because he sees actual talent in these people. He sees what these people are willing to do for an opportunity. And he capitalizes off of that. Let's call a spade a spade. Because we can't ignore that most of these artists had some type of vices that they dealt with. A lot of them were junkies. A lot of them had particular things that they were into that they shouldn't have been into, whether it was paraphernalia or it was drugs. And he used that against people to get what he wanted. Let's call a spade a spade. That's all I'm saying.
Them. In the early 2000s, he becomes chairman of Universal Music Group's UK division, then chairman of UMG's international operations. And then, in 2010, comes the call that changes everything. Universal Music Group, the largest music company in the world, needs a
work today is broken. Every day, people juggle so many different tools just to get
new chairman and CEO. The man who holds that title is Doug Morris, a legendary figure in his own right, the architect of some of UMG's biggest deals. And Doug Morris looks across the landscape of candidates and sees one person, Lucian Grange. On January 1st, 2011, Lucian Grange becomes chairman and CEO of Universal Music Group. He's 50 years old. He started as a runner with nothing, and now he sits at the top of the most powerful music company on earth. But he doesn't stop there. Most people, when they get the biggest job in their industry, spend their first year learning the lay of the land, settling in, being careful. Lucian Grange spent his first year buying EMI Records, the label that gave the world the Beatles, Katy Perry, Queen, the Beach Boys, Pink Floyd, Lady Antebellum, one of the most iconic music companies ever created. In September 2012, Grange completed the acquisition of EMI's recorded music operations for $1.9 billion. In one stroke, he folded Capitol Records, Blue Note Records, Virgin Records, and EMI's entire catalog into Universal Music Group. The empire doubled overnight. Critics screamed. Regulators in Europe raised hell. The European Commission looked at this deal and said, this is too much power for one company. They forced UMG to sell off some assets. Parlophone went to Warner Music Group for nearly $500 million. But even after the forced divestiture, Grange had pulled off what one industry publication called likely the last big deal in the music business. He had restructured the entire global music landscape to center around Universal. And then he kept going. 2013. Grange is named the most powerful person in the music business by Billboard for the first time. 2014, he takes UMG into film and television through the acquisition of Eagle Rock Entertainment. The company's first major documentary, Amy, about Amy Winehouse, wins the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature. 2015, Universal Music Group is named the top-selling music company in America. Their market share is so dominant that every other label combined can barely match them. 2016, Queen Elizabeth II knights him, not metaphorically, literally. Sir Lucian Grange,
And we
Night
supposed to
Bachelor.
make it seem like he had no ties to these folks when he went to their school as a youngin'. Did I mishear that earlier? That he went to Queen Elizabeth's school when he was a kid? But we making it seem like he has some type of rags to riches story. He was always in these circles. He was around royalty from the get-go. If you guys know who Lucian's father is, like he said, his father was heavy into being around royalty already. So this that whole beginning that these folks had nothing, that they grew up with nothing. Come on, you can't get around these folks if you don't have certain relationships, man. But they paint this image like they're not as powerful as they are. And they play off of people's ignorance. But I'm so glad that ignorance is breaking. Because the Lord will be done. The wickedness that these people have caused will come to light. And it will be on to us to make a choice whether we are going to stand next to these people or stand against them. And I hope you guys choose the latter. Outrageous.
Of the Order of the British Empire. The runner from North London is now royalty. 2017, UMG is worth $22 billion, triple what it was worth when Grange took over 6 years earlier. 2019, he tops Billboard's Power 100 again. The music industry is not recovering from disruption. Under Grange's leadership, it is growing for the first time since the CD era. 2020, Billboard invents a new category and names him Executive of the Decade. 2021, Grange takes Universal Music Group public on the Euronext Amsterdam Stock Exchange. The IPO values UMG at approximately $53 billion. For successfully executing one of the largest media IPOs in history, Grange receives a compensation package of $303 million in a single year. $300 million in 1 year. By 2023, when Grange writes his annual memo to UMG's global workforce, he is unambiguous. UMG is the most successful company in the history of the music industry. Not one of the most successful, the most successful ever in all of history. And look at the numbers. He's not wrong. In 2023, 6 of the top 10 most streamed artists on Spotify globally were Universal artists. Yes. Taylor Swift, The Weeknd, Drake, Feed, Karol G, and Lana Del Rey. In the United States, Universal's market share of recorded music eclipsed every competitor. Republic Records alone held 13.47% of the entire U.S. market. Interscope added another 8.80%. Combined, UMG's labels were responsible for nearly a quarter of every song consumed in America. Think about what that means in practical terms. 1 out of every 4 songs you heard last year. 1 out of every 4 streams. 1 out of every 4 albums that appeared on a chart somewhere. All of it flowing through the machine that Lucian Grange built. All of it generating revenue that flows back to Universal Music Group's shareholders and, most significantly, to the man at the top. But here's the part that never makes the press releases. Here's the part they don't put in the year-end memo. What happens to the artists who try to fight back? There's something else people don't talk about when they talk about Lucian Grange, something that makes this story more than just a corporate power narrative. He's building a dynasty. And to understand that, you have to understand what happened to him personally before he ever reached the top of the mountain. Because it's the kind of story that puts everything else in perspective. In 1993, Lucian Grange's wife, Samantha, went into the hospital to give birth to their son, Elliot. Something went wrong during labor. Samantha fell into a coma. She never came out of it. For 14 years, from 1993 to 2007, she remained in that coma while Lucian raised their son, built his career, climbed from managing director to chairman to CEO, and navigated grief that most people couldn't conceive of managing for a single day, let alone a decade and a half. Samantha passed away in 2007, 4 years before Lucian took the biggest job in music. You have to...
I'm sorry, and I don't mean to be unempathetic. But in finding out the things that he was doing with Diddy and stuff, this man is a homosexual. So is it a coincidence that the woman who was giving birth to his child died? Went into a coma during childbirth. Well, he didn't never want her to be able to claim any of that money. Rather if she got a divorce from him or it was child support or anything. He didn't want her hands on that money. And is it far-fetched to think that he has something to do with her going into that coma? I don't put nothing past these folks, especially in knowing that he is a homosexual. And this isn't anything, you know what I'm saying, to try to make it seem like, because they would come for your channel, you say anything about these folks. But he's one of them. So it seems a little weird, right? Y'all let me know down in the comment section. That's a little weird.
Factor that in when you look at what he built, because the man who runs Universal Music Group with an iron hand, the man who outmaneuvered hedge funds and platform CEOs and governments and competitors, that man was simultaneously the father of a boy who grew up without his mother. That parallel story running underneath the corporate empire gives you a dimension to Grange that the press releases don't capture. In 2002, Lucien remarried. His second wife, Caroline, gave him 2 daughters, Alice and Betsy. He now lives with his family in a Pacific Palisades estate that he bought for $13 million in 2012, a property that by 2025 was valued at over $20 million, and a second home in La Quinta, a 6,025 square foot property he purchased for $6.3 million in 2019. The man who started as a runner is now living like the executive he became.
Was it down the street from Diddy?
But the dynasty story doesn't end with Lucien, because his son, Elliot, is not sitting on the sideline watching his father run the music.
Imagine being able to build anything.
Sorry about all these ads, but I told y'all with videos like this, it's going to be a bunch of them.
Music industry. Elliot Grange founded 10K Projects, an independent record label that punches way above its weight. His roster has included Trippie Redd and Tekashi 6ix9ine. He operates in the disruptive, controversial end of the market, the end that generates the most attention, the most streams, the most controversy. He understands, the way his father understands, that culture doesn't wait for permission. You either get ahead of it or you chase it forever. And then in April 2023, Elliot Grange did something that cemented the family's place not just in the music industry's business history, but in its cultural history. He married Sofia Richie, the daughter of Lionel Richie, the man who gave the world Hello, All Night Long, Endless Love, and Say You, Say Me. The Motown and pop icon who spent 6 decades as one of the most beloved artists on the planet. The man whose music catalog is one of the crown jewels of American pop history. And where is Lionel Richie's music? Where do you think it's distributed?
Right.
Through this marriage, the Grange family has woven itself into the fabric of one of the most iconic musical legacies in American history. The son of the man who controls the music industry married the daughter of one of its greatest artists. You genuinely cannot write a script this tight.
Like,
in 2022, Elliot purchased a Brentwood mansion for $27 million. The next generation of the family is not just inheriting influence, they're building their own version of it. Elliot's label operates with the independence of an indie, but with the infrastructure advantages that come with being the son of the man who runs everything. That's not nepotism, that's strategy. That's how empires transfer power between generations. Go back and look at the history. Leonard Chess passed chess records to his son. Clive Davis groomed his successors at every label he touched. David Geffen built a network that influenced every major label in Hollywood. The music industry has always rewarded bloodlines and inner circles. The Grange family is just the latest and arguably the most powerful iteration of that tradition. The Bronfman family had their chapter with Warner. The Geffen name lives on in a label. The Chess brothers are in the textbooks. But the Grange dynasty is still in progress, still being written in real time. And right now, the pen is in Lucien's hand. Now, here's where the story gets much darker, because when you control 40% of recorded music, when every major streaming platform needs your catalog to survive, when artists need your distribution to reach the world, what happens to the people who step out of line? Let's be extremely clear here. None of what I'm about to tell you has been proven in a court of law. These are allegations, publicly stated accusations, and patterns that people inside and outside the industry have pointed to over the years. Draw your own conclusions. But the conversation is real. The receipts are public, and the pattern is worth examining. When Kanye West, one of the most commercially dominant artists of his generation, a man who sold over $140 million worth of music in the height of his career, started going against the machine, what happened? In late October 2022, Def Jam, a Universal subsidiary, ended their partnership with Good Music, Kanye's label, citing his public outbursts. But Kanye had been publicly clashing with the industry for years before that. He talked repeatedly about not owning his masters. He talked about how executives controlled the narrative around artists. He named Lucian Grange directly in his music. And then suddenly, Kanye West, the man who won more Grammy Awards than almost anyone alive, found himself without a label, without distribution, without the machine behind him. Now, his personal behavior in that period was also genuinely destructive and offensive in ways that can't be ignored. But the speed with
when all he was doing was calling out the people who were keeping him at bay, with the people who was trying to sun him at every moment. He didn't hide that from us. But you all was so thirsty to turn your backs on him when he was just calling out the powers that be. This man was literally trying to destroy him. He was literally trying to buy back his masters. And they were not allowing him to do so. And it wasn't that he didn't have the funds. He had Yeezys. He was selling Yeezys. That man was almost a billionaire at that point. I think he was a billionaire at that point. But they was not letting him buy back his own masters. Why? Because that's where their power comes from. Because again, they aren't the ones creating the music. They're just distributors. They just own the companies that can keep you locked out if they don't like the things that you do or say. How isn't that modern day slavery? How isn't that a monopoly? How isn't that total control? And because he called it out and said that he was going DEFCON on them, they acted like it was the end of the world, and everybody got behind that, saying that he was a nut. When he didn't say anything nutty to me. He just called out what it was. But everybody was so thirsty to be able to listen to those narratives that they are told to believe by these people. Because again, their power don't just stop at the music industry. It goes into every industry of this world. And anybody that goes against them, they are at war with them. Because they want to stay hidden. They want their range of control to stay hidden while they reap the benefits of making us all slaves. And as long as we allow them to do so and criminalize people like this who are willing to stand up against them, we will all be at their mercy. But I don't think we will all be at their mercy for too much longer.
Which the industry turned its back was something that people noticed. When you go against the machine goes against you.
Exactly.
Then there's Drake. For most of the 2000s, Drake was the most streamed artist on the planet. His deal with Universal, reportedly worth $400 million, was described in the industry as one of the most lucrative artist contracts ever signed. Kanye publicly called Grange Drake's Rich Baby Daddy and said Drake's music had become so controlled by Universal that it had lost its authenticity. My daddy controlled the spins, my daddy got the DSPs, Kanye mocked, imitating Drake's supposed dependence on Grange's infrastructure. Then came the Kendrick Lamar beef. In 2024, Kendrick Lamar dropped Not Like Us, a devastating diss track aimed at Drake. And in November 2024, Drake filed a legal petition in Manhattan court alleging that Universal Music Group had deliberately sabotaged him. His legal team
That's killing me.
You're not ready for.
Accused UMG of using bots to artificially inflate the popularity of Not Like Us, of licensing the song to Spotify at drastically reduced rates specifically to boost its algorithm performance, and of running what they described as a payola scheme designed to damage Drake's reputation. The filing also hinted at potential RICO Act violations, the federal organized crime statute usually reserved for mob prosecutions. Drake's team alleged that UMG had essentially weaponized the Kendrick Lamar feud against Drake, choosing sides internally and using their enormous infrastructure to tip the scales. Drake claimed he suffered economic harm from the feud and from what he described as Universal's deliberate manipulation. UMG denied everything. But here's what makes this so explosive. Kendrick Lamar is also signed to UMG through his TDE Imprints distribution deal with Interscope. So you have a situation where the world's largest music company had two of the biggest artists in hip-hop on its roster, and allegedly chose to throw its full weight behind one to destroy the other. Think about what that means for every other artist on that roster. Liam Payne, the One Direction member who never quite reached the heights his bandmates did as a solo artist, was reportedly dropped by Universal's Capitol Records just days before his tragic death in October 2024. Sources described him as being on the wrong path, a man at his most vulnerable without the label infrastructure he depended on. Frank Ocean famously described his relationship with Def Jam as a 7-year chess game to gain control of his own career. He eventually won that game, but at enormous cost to his momentum and creative output during some of his most important years. The artist Keisha, who had a massive breakout hit with Hideaway in 2014 and was immediately signed by Island Records, a Universal label, described her experience this way. "Once I signed to a major label, everything slowed down. The major label was fear-based. It wasn't about growth and longevity. It was about how much are we profiting right now." Nine Inch Nails' Trent Reznor publicly called out Universal Music Group's pricing practices during an Australian tour, writing, "Shame on you, UMG. Year Zero is selling for $34.99 Australian dollars. No wonder people steal music." Artist after artist, decade after decade, the same story repeats. You sign with Universal, you become enormous, and then, somewhere in that relationship, you discover that the machine you needed to get here is also the machine that controls where you go next.
Exactly.
And that when your interests diverge from their interests, theirs win. Now, you might say, well, any label has this dynamic. Any corporation prioritizes profit over the individual, and you'd be right. But when a single entity controls 40% of all recorded music and has direct relationships with every major streaming platform, here's where it gets really structural. Here's where you start to understand not just how Universal runs the music industry, but how they've embedded themselves so deeply into the new economy of music that they literally cannot be separated from it. Streaming killed the CD. From about 2003 to 2016, the music industry was in freefall. Revenue was collapsing. Labels were bleeding. Artists were confused. Napster had already destroyed the old model and nobody had figured out the new one. The industry was losing billions of dollars a year and the executives who ran it were terrified. Lucian
And
Grange
it wasn't the fact that the artists were losing money. Because the artists are always going to make their money when they tour, when they do all of their promotions and all. They're going to make their money. But it was the labels that was losing their money. They were losing out. So that's why people don't buy physical anymore. They made sure that they created a new system to where streams became the new norm. But they just made sure that they owned all the streaming websites. They own the biggest streaming websites. And if someone tried to create a new one, they just destroyed them and absorbed them. So that all the artists still had to come to them. But once that's over, even though it's looking like that's starting to come to an end too with Spotify, when people finding out that all of these bots and stuff that's paid by these labels. Once this is over with, this is going to literally block out all of these labels. A lot of artists are going to become independent. And once independence come, I feel like that's when the return of physical needs to come back. Because the artists, all they would have to do is follow the blueprint that Master P was following. Become rich on your own. Create your own market. Create your own distribution. Because that's the only reason that these labels are even still afloat now. The artists aren't going for not having their masters anymore, so they're just paying for distribution. So they up the price on distribution. But once that's over with, once the streaming era comes to an end, and artists find out a way to distribute their own music like Tory Lanez did, that's why Tory Lanez got locked up. Y'all believe that whole stuff between Megan Thee Stallion, even though they didn't find any shards in her foot. They didn't find any bullet fragments in her foot. They said that she stepped on glass. It even came out that he wasn't even the one shooting the gun that night. It was Meg's best friend because she was fucking him. That was the whole reason that happened. It was because Tory released the album and made $1 million without the labels. He figured out how to distribute his music using NFTs. And they couldn't have that. They couldn't have that because all of that money that they could have had from that album, they got boxed out. And if other artists had went down that avenue, that would have been it for the labels then and there. And once all of that got to coming to light again, that's when he got stabbed. You know what I'm saying? Hang on, you guys. This is my wife. Hey, baby, I'm in the middle of making a video. What's up?
Okay, my bad. I was just telling you I'm almost home. Okay, bye.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye. But that was the only reason he even just got stabbed up, because all of the evidence was coming out that he didn't shoot her, that she stepped in glass, and that the real reason people were coming to their own conclusions like I did. Because again, this is just me who's saying this. This isn't public fact, but I believe Jay-Z and them were complicit in helping this bastard, putting away somebody that was challenging their power. An artist who was going against the status quo. And they had to get him up out of here.
Figured out the new model before almost anyone else in the business, while other executives were fighting streaming, trying to sue it into submission, trying to legislate against it, trying to hold on to a CD-era mentality long past its expiration date. Grange was making deals. He recognized that the platforms were going to win whether the labels cooperated or not, and he made a strategic choice that changed the entire landscape. Instead of fighting the future, he would position Universal at the center of it. He negotiated directly and simultaneously with Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, Facebook, Tencent, and Amazon to ensure that Universal's catalog sat at the core of every major music platform on Earth. He structured those deals so that UMG's artists had algorithmic advantages, premium playlist placement, and royalty structures that no smaller label could ever negotiate from a weaker position. He made Universal so essential to the streaming ecosystem that the platforms had no real choice but to work with him on his terms. In 2017, he formalized this with a multi-year global licensing agreement with Spotify, the world's largest streaming platform. The exact terms have never been fully disclosed publicly. What we know is that Spotify's recommendation algorithms, their curated playlists, their Discover Weekly and Release Radar features that determine what hundreds of millions of people hear, those systems are built on relationships with catalog suppliers. And no supplier in the world has more catalog than Universal. Think about what that means concretely. When you open Spotify in the morning and it recommends music to you, that recommendation is not random or neutral. It is the product of algorithmic systems shaped by the business relationships between the platform and its most important partners.
Hey bro, can you make me something that sounds like I just died, went to heaven in Japan, and some angels started singing to me?
The labels with the deepest integration into those systems have a structural advantage that no amount of raw artistic talent can overcome without the same institutional backing. In 2023, Universal had 6 of the top 10 most streamed artists globally on Spotify. Taylor Swift at number 1, The Weeknd, Drake, Feed, Karol G, Lana Del Rey. Not coincidence, infrastructure. But Grange demonstrated just how total this control had become in January 2024, when Universal pulled its entire catalog from TikTok after the platform's licensing deal expired and negotiations stalled. The silence was immediate. Taylor Swift's music vanished. Billie Eilish went mute. Justin Bieber, BTS, The Weeknd, Bad Bunny, gone. Millions of videos went silent overnight. Noah Kahan, the artist whose TikTok virality on Stick Season had gotten him signed to Republic Records, appeared on his own profile to tell his fans he could no longer promote his music there. An artist whose career had been built partly by that very platform was now powerless because his label had made a business decision that superseded his personal relationship with it. TikTok, a platform with over 1 billion global users, one of the most powerful cultural forces in the world, was crippled for music discovery for the duration of that standoff. The eventual resolution came when TikTok agreed to terms that addressed royalty rates and AI content policies. UMG went back. The music came back. But the message had been sent loudly to every platform in the digital music ecosystem. You need Universal more than Universal needs you. Grange pushed this logic even further into the AI era, as artificial intelligence-generated music started flooding streaming platforms through 2024 and 2025, creating millions of fake songs engineered to siphon royalties from the pools that real human artists depend on. Universal took the hardest line in the industry. In his January 2026 memo to staff, Grange declared it in all capital letters: UMG will not stand by and watch irresponsible business models take hold. Models that devalue artists, fail to provide adequate compensation for their work, stifle their creativity, and ultimately diminish their ability to reach fans. But beyond the rhetoric, they backed it with contractual force.
Exactly.
Universal negotiated provisions into their platform deals specifically preventing AI-generated content from being counted in the same royalty pools as UMG's signed artists, while independent musicians watched their per-stream payments shrink as AI noise diluted the pool. Universal's artists were protected by language that no independent could have ever negotiated from their position. This is what structural power actually looks like at the highest level. Not what you own in isolation, not who's on your roster, but how deeply the rules of the entire game have been written around your interests. Universal isn't just playing chess. Universal designed the board, set the pieces, and writes the rule book between games.
Did
and
y'all
here's
beat
the
that?
uncomfortable.
Did y'all beat that? He tried to hug Justin Bieber. Ducked out of the
level.
way.
Not what you own in isolation, not who's on your roster, but how deeply the rules of the entire game have been written around your interests. Universal isn't just playing chess. Universal designed the board, set the pieces, and writes the rule book between games. And here's the uncomfortable truth at the center of it all. The same power that allows Universal to protect Taylor Swift from AI theft is the same power that can make Drake's streams mysteriously underperform when his legal team starts filing petitions with Grange's name in them. The same infrastructure that launched Noah Kahan's career is the same infrastructure that, the moment it stops working for you, can make you feel like you never existed. Power cuts in every direction. That's what makes it power. 2024 was supposed to be another year of dominance for Lucian Grange. Instead, he found himself named in not one but two explosive legal situations that put his name in front of people who'd never heard of him before. First came the Diddy lawsuits.
Exactly.
Sean Combs' arrest and the avalanche of civil suits that followed it triggered a wave of allegations that swept through the entire music industry. One of those suits, filed by a man called Lil Rod, named Lucian Grange, Universal Music Group, and Motown Records as defendants, alleging that they had furthered, participated in, and helped conceal Diddy's alleged conduct. Grange's lawyers came out swinging. They called the allegations legally baseless, describing them as a knowingly false general business partnership allegation coupled with the fabrication of a non-existent duty. They filed motions to have all claims dismissed with prejudice. The legal machinery of Universal, which maintains an army of communications executives specifically to manage exactly this kind of situation, worked to contain the narrative before it spread. The judge's ruling is still pending at the time of this video, but the fact that Grange's name was in those filings at all, the CEO of the most powerful music company on earth, linked to the most explosive scandal in the industry's recent history, was something that could not be quietly managed away. Then came Drake. The petition Drake filed in Manhattan court in November 2024 was not technically a lawsuit. It was a pre-action petition, a legal mechanism under New York law designed to gather information before a civil claim is filed. But the allegations inside it were extraordinary. Drake's legal team pointed to violations of the RICO Act, a statute with roots in fighting organized crime.
For the first time in modern history, college student
They alleged conspiracy. They alleged fraud. They alleged that the company Drake had entrusted with his career had turned that infrastructure against him. The petition named Grange personally as part of the alleged misconduct. UMG denied everything. Their response was characteristically airtight. They acknowledged nothing, admitted nothing, conceded nothing. The legal machinery hummed, but you have to sit with the image for a moment. The most commercially successful artist of the streaming era, a man who had called Lucian Grange's name in his music as a mark of status, was now putting that same name in a federal court filing.
And it's like, because I don't feel for Drake. Because my thing is that, like he just said, Drake was the #1 streaming artist during this era. Literally was giving this man shout outs in his name. So when it was working for you, you understood that all of this stuff was going on. But when it was working for you, and when it was used for you, at the detriment for other artists, it was fine. It was cool. It was okay. You benefited from it. And when you benefited from it, you was with it. You was down with it. You was shouting out this man's name in your songs. But then the second it turned against you, that's when it became a problem. I don't rock with that. I don't mess with that whatsoever. Because It's so disingenuous. You playing both sides of the field and you can't do that. Be against it from the jump. Be against it from its inception and always be fighting against it. But you only fought against it when it wasn't in your favor. Man, miss me with that. You getting everything
Somewhere
you
in
deserve.
North London, the 65-year-old runner who became a knight barely blinked. Let me give you a quick education on the music industry food chain, because this is what ties everything together. When an artist signs with a major label, Universal, Sony, Warner, they are typically signing over a significant portion of their master recordings. Your masters are the original recorded versions of your songs. They are the asset. Whoever owns the masters collects royalties every time a song is streamed, played on the radio, licensed for a TV show or movie, or included in an advertisement. The master is the golden ticket. Most artists, when they're young and hungry and desperate for a deal, sign over their masters without fully understanding what they're giving away, and then they spend the rest of their careers watching someone else collect money on their life's work. Prince understood this. He famously changed his name to an unpronounceable symbol and appeared in public with the word slave written on his face to protest his deal with Warner Brothers. He spent years fighting to own his music. If you don't own your masters, Prince said repeatedly, your master owns you. Taylor Swift, who is now a UMG artist through Republic Records, had her master recordings from her first 6 albums owned by her original label, Big Machine, which was run by Scooter Braun. When Braun sold the masters to a private equity firm without giving Swift the opportunity to buy them, she declared the situation her worst-case scenario and began re-recording every single one of her original albums from scratch, a multi-year effort specifically designed to devalue the masters Braun held and redirect fans to versions she owned. That effort succeeded in a way that nobody in the industry expected. Fans followed her. The original masters were worth significantly less once Taylor's versions existed. It was the most successful act of financial rebellion by a major artist in the modern era. But Taylor Swift is Taylor Swift. She has the fan base, the financial resources, and the cultural capital to...
Her by doing that is all the proof that any artist needed, that these labels need them, and it's not vice versa. She could have went on and did that without this label. But it's about money for a lot of these people. That's why with a lot of these people, see, it's working out in her favor right now. But the second that it doesn't, and then she starts complaining, I can't feel for her. Because you're putting yourself in the devil's hands. Only because you're benefiting from it now. You better just hope that you continue to
execute a strategy like that. What about the artists who don't? What about the thousands of artists who signed deals in the 2000s and 2010s, handed over their masters, and now watch their music generate streaming revenue they never fully see? What happens to them when they speak up? The pattern that multiple sources, former label employees, industry journalists, music lawyers, have described over the years is what they call shelving. An artist who causes problems, who pushes back too hard on the label, who makes noise about their deal structure or goes to the press with complaints, that artist finds their releases delayed. Their promotional budget mysteriously shrinks. Radio stations that used to play their music stop booking them. Playlist curators stop featuring them. The algorithm stops surfacing their catalog. It's not always explicit. Nobody sends you a letter saying you're blackballed. It's quieter than that. The machine just stops working for you.
Simple as that.
Industry lawyer and music business commentator Bobby Deal described the phenomenon this way in a 2023 interview. The label doesn't have to do anything active to destroy your career. No. They just have to stop doing anything. And when you're an artist who's built your success on the infrastructure of a major label, on their radio relationships, their playlist deals, their marketing budgets, the moment they stop, you feel like you're falling. The counter-argument, and it's worth acknowledging, is that labels invest enormous resources in artists, and when those artists don't generate return on that investment, cutting the promotional budget is just business, not conspiracy, just capitalism. But when the same company controls the radio relationships, the streaming platform deals, the playlist algorithmic tools, and the artist's masters all at once, is that still just capitalism, or is it something else? By the time we get to 2025 and 2026, Lucian Grange is approaching the twilight of his tenure as CEO. He'll be 66 in 2026. The question of succession, who runs Universal after Grange, is one of the most closely watched conversations in the music industry. And that question is more complicated than it seems, because as one industry publication put it, Universal Music Group is increasingly looking like just another asset class. The company that Grange built on the backs of artists and A&R instinct is now a publicly traded company answerable to hedge funds and private equity. Bill Ackman's Pershing Square Capital Management owns a significant stake and has been flexing its muscles in boardroom decisions. Tencent, the Chinese tech giant, owns another 20%. Vivendi, the French media company, holds another major stake.
Apparently you can go from 0 to a complete site in just a single prompt with Wix Harmony. I don't know if this is going to be possible. Or Vibe.
These are not music people. These are financial engineers. And their interests are not necessarily aligned with what makes great music, or what's good for artists, or what builds cultural legacies. The Grange era has been characterized by a particular vision. Music is the most important thing, and if you protect the music and invest in the artists, the money will follow. Whether you agree with his methods or not, whether you think his power is too concentrated or not, that vision produced results. Under Grange, the music industry went from dying to thriving. Annual revenues that were collapsing in the early 2000s are now growing again for the first time in a generation. What comes after him, whoever runs Universal in the 2030s, may not share that vision. They may see it purely as a catalog business, a licensing machine, a financial instrument. And if that happens, what becomes of the culture? Meanwhile, Elliot Grange is quietly building. 10K Projects is expanding. His marriage into the Ritchie family has deepened the dynasty's roots in American music history. The Grange name, which meant nothing to most people a decade ago, is becoming synonymous with a kind of second-generation power that could outlast Lucian's tenure at the top. In his 2026 memo to staff, Lucian Grange wrote about superfans, about AI, about streaming innovation, about emerging markets. He talked about UMG's investment in India's film and music industry, about protecting artists from AI slop, about the future of music as a global phenomenon. The language was forward-looking, ambitious, the language of a man who still believes he's at the beginning of something, not the end. But the industry is watching. The hedge funds are circling. Drake's lawyers are filing. The AI generators are churning. And somewhere, an 18-year-old kid who dropped out of school in 2025 with nothing but a pair of headphones and a dream is about to sign a contract with one of Universal's labels and hand over the rights to the music that will define their life. The machine doesn't stop. It never stops. Let's bring this all the way back to where we started. You asked who controls the music you hear. And the answer, if you've been watching, is more complex than a single name. It's a system. A web of Jewish entrepreneurs who saw opportunity in music when nobody else did, who built labels from nothing in the 1940s and 1950s, who bet on black music before it was commercially mainstream, who took hip-hop seriously before it was respectable, who built and merged and acquired until there was nowhere left to go except to the top. Lucian Grange is the apex of that system, a man who started as a runner in 1978 and became a knight by 2016, a man whose company controls 40% of all recorded music on Earth, a man whose artists include Taylor Swift, Drake, Eminem, The Weeknd, Billie Eilish, Kendrick Lamar, Morgan Wallen, Lady Gaga, Post Malone, and literally hundreds of other names you know. A man who not only survived the digital revolution that killed the music industry, but used it to become more powerful than any music executive in history. The Bronfmans had Warner. Rick Rubin built Def Jam. Clive Davis discovered Whitney Houston. The Chess Brothers gave the world rock and roll. Each of them was a chapter. Lucian Grange is the whole book. But here's the question you should be sitting with right now. The question that nobody in the industry wants to ask out loud because the answer makes people uncomfortable. What happens to the music when one company controls this much of it? What happens to the art when the commercial infrastructure gets this concentrated? When the algorithm is shaped by the same company that owns the music, when the artists who challenge the system, the Kanyes, the Drakes, the Frank Oceans, can be made to feel the weight of that system whenever they step out of line. Is that good for music? Is it good for culture? Is it good for the kid in Houston or Memphis or London who's making something in their bedroom right now that nobody has ever heard before? Something that doesn't fit any existing format, something that could genuinely change the way people hear the world. But who can't break through without the machine? These are the questions that matter. These are the questions that nobody at the top of the industry wants you to be asking. And maybe, the fact that you're asking them now is itself a kind of power. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know, do you think this level of concentration in the music industry is a problem? Or do you
all think it's a problem? Because I'm not even gonna let that video finish. Like, these folks aren't doing that, and that it's not detrimental to the industry. It has to stop. Because again, what talent does this man have other than some money? And it's paper money at that. He's giving you paper money, which is really debt, in order to become rich and famous. That don't sound like a good trade-off to me. But a lot of people get caught up in this materialistic world that Satan has created through the hands of people like this. Would you guys let me know in the comment section, what do you all think? Do you guys still think that it's a conspiracy theory that these Jewish people own the music industry? Or do you think it's a lot of validity to what was just said? But that's gonna do it for this video. Make sure you guys hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell so that you're notified whenever I do drop a video here. We're on the road to 500 subscribers, so make sure you guys sub up and join the kingdom. And make sure you guys are repenting and come to the kingdom of the Most High God. But with that being said, King Marcel out. Peace.
It's a lie, looking for the prize. That's eternal life. And bringing the chains in my mind. I'm talking real peace of mind.